Whoa, 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 whoa. Wait a minute. Before you lose your mind, stick with me here. This one is likely to make a lot of people upset. And while that is not my intention, I do want to make it clear that the goal here is to keep this as objective as possible. And so if you do find yourself triggered at any moment throughout this video, please just let me know in the comments down below exactly why that is. And if you think you know how this story ends, stick with me, because by the end of this, you might actually completely change your perspective on what is actually occurring in the world of digital assets. First, let's break something down that can otherwise be a little bit confusing. Because when it comes to these digital assets, we typically have two different components that are sometimes referenced as one thing. So we have, for instance, the network, and then we have the token. So for Bitcoin specifically, you have the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin protocol, which is essentially just software that is being run by different computers all over the world. You can think of the network as like a public utility, or imagine like a public transportation or the subway specifically, right? And then you have the token. So you can think of Bitcoin, the token, as this native asset that you can use on that network. Now, this token, you can imagine, can have demand and value based upon the utility of the network. The more that the network can do, or the more value that this network provides, then the more value that the token that you can use on that network may have. Think of the token like a key card or your ticket to be able to get into and then use a public transportation like the subway. Now, let's talk about why Bitcoin specifically exists. Bitcoin came out of the financial crisis in 2008. Some say that that's a coincidence. We're not here to talk about that. The reality is that Bitcoin was designed to solve a couple of different problems. One of them being the double spend problem. The idea here is that before Bitcoin existed, essentially anything on the internet could be copied endlessly. That goes from music to movies to even money. Digital dollars that we have today and that we've had for quite some time work only because of a central authority that essentially prevents there from being the same double spend or copying effect. These central authorities like your bank or even PayPal only work because they have their own databases that they're cross-referencing information on to make sure that you can't spend the same dollar twice. But you have to have full trust in these institutions like the bank or PayPal to make sure that they do right by you, because they can freeze or reverse transactions whenever they feel like it. Bitcoin changed that, especially for money, because on the Bitcoin network, first off, there's no central authority at all. In fact, the only authority is the code itself that everyone that's using the network is actually agreeing upon the rules of. Bitcoin created a network where you could have data, information, and even money that cannot just be duplicated or printed at will. There will only be 21 million Bitcoin, and that is hard coded into the code. Now, that could change if a certain percentage of everyone on that network agreed upon it, but that is the only way. So no government, no founder or CEO can just change the code without everyone else agreeing. Now, part of the way that this whole system works is through what's called a consensus mechanism. And in particular for Bitcoin, this consensus mechanism is called proof of work. And a consensus mechanism is just a way for all of these different computers to coordinate with one another without having to trust or rely upon another computer or another participant in order to accomplish the goal of, in this case, securing the network and also ordering transactions across that network. On the Bitcoin network, you have these miners who are essentially offering electricity as well as computational resources in order to secure the network. And for that, they are rewarded with the token that's called Bitcoin. Now, on the other hand, we have this token that is called XRP, and it serves a completely different purpose. Where Bitcoin is targeting the store of value and sovereign money use case, XRP is specifically targeting the inefficiency of cross-border payments. Right now, banks use a system called correspondent banking, where they have these nostro-vostro accounts that are used to send money around the world. Imagine you live in the United States and you want to send $1,000 to your friend who lives in Japan. So you, as the American, ask your bank, let's call it Bank A, to transfer money to your friend in Japan so that they can spend that $1,000 locally in yen. Here's how that works behind the scenes today. Bank A doesn't just send dollars across the ocean instantly. Instead, they have what are called pre-funded foreign currency accounts at Bank B, which is your friend's bank. These pre-funded foreign currency accounts are called nostro vostro accounts. When you send money to Japan like that, Bank A is going to deduct the dollars from your account. And then Bank B in Japan is going to deduct yen from Bank A's account. That yen is then used to pay your friend directly. This system means that there are trillions of dollars that are just locked away in these nostro vostro accounts, just sitting there idly waiting for someone to be able to use them for international payments. That capital is just sitting there idle, so it can't be used for investing, lending, or anything productive in society. Imagine that you have a safety deposit box in Tokyo that just has thousands and thousands of dollars in it. And it's just sitting there waiting just in case you need to pay your friend one day. On top of having idle capital sitting around that banks can't do anything with, they also are going to incur what are called foreign exchange or FX risks as well. During this transaction, Bank A will actually go to the foreign exchange market and buy back the yen that it had to use to settle that transaction in Japan. The thing about all of this is that the foreign currency values can shift up and down while it takes time for all of these payments to settle. So the banks are taking the risk that the value of the yen could go up or down drastically while this is all taking place. XRP is designed to upgrade the system by acting as a bridge asset. Here's what that means. Imagine Bank A takes its US dollars and buys XRP. When it buys that XRP, it then sends it over to Bank B, which will settle within 3 to 5 seconds. Bank B will then take that XRP, sell it into yen, and now the complete transaction is done within seconds when it may have taken days using the traditional correspondent banking system. This could free up trillions of dollars because now instead of having to hold foreign currency reserves, banks could actually just hold the XRP and transfer it and sell it into the asset that they need as they need it. This also helps to solve that foreign currency exchange risk because now you hold XRP, which can settle within seconds in and out of whatever currency you need. Bitcoin's network processes transactions every 10 minutes or so, and it takes several blocks for transactions to be considered secure. So because of this, one single Bitcoin transaction can sometimes take more than an hour to actually be confirmed and considered secure. During periods of high demand, Bitcoin's transaction speed can slow down drastically due to the congestion of the network and that high demand for block space. This can also make Bitcoin transactions more expensive in periods of high demand because that block space essentially gets auctioned off at a higher price. This makes Bitcoin essentially impractical for everyday payments or especially for faster cross-border payments. The XRP ledger settles transactions within 3 to 5 seconds. The XRP ledger has a different consensus mechanism called federated consensus, where essentially the different validators, often banks, actually just agree with each other upon which transactions they would like to approve. It's a little bit deeper than that, but we're not getting into that today. XRP transactions also settle for fractions of a penny. And the cost of these transactions and the speed of these transactions is actually scalable with network usage. So the network doesn't get congested or way more expensive just because more people are wanting to use it. Now, what's very different about XRP in the XRP ledger is the existence of this company called Ripple. Let's break it down. The XRP ledger, when it was created, it had a pre-mining of all of the XRP, which is 100 billion XRP. Now, near the founding of the XRP ledger itself, 80% of all of the XRP was donated by the founders of the XRP ledger to a new company called Ripple. This gifting was intended to fund Ripple's business development and also to help expand adoption of the entire XRP ecosystem. Now, Ripple is not a charity. It is a for-profit business that has been valued at as much as $15 billion in the private markets as of August 2025. Ripple holds about half of all of the XRP, which is about 50 billion in an escrow. And this escrow has a scheduled amount that is released every month. And in that, Ripple can decide to sell this XRP on the open market. This is a concern, and quite frankly, a very valid concern for people that are worried about the control of the supply of XRP and also the overall decentralization of the XRP ledger network. But let's take a second to think about this critically, because incentives matter. Warren Buffett has been famously quoted for saying, "Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome." Owning a massive portion of XRP means that Ripple would love to see it increase in value. Ripple is a for-profit company that has shareholders that it is accountable to. Ripple owns a significant portion of XRP, and because it exists within a capitalistic system with shareholders, it only makes sense that they would want to see the value of XRP rise. I wanted to add a little bit of an Easter egg because a lot of people don't know this. One of Ripple's co-founders, Chris Larsen, is a well-known tech executive and has been in the technology space since the 90s. He currently owns around 2.6 billion or so XRP, and his net worth is just short of $10 billion as it stands right now today. In 2018, there was an article that came out when XRP had hit its all-time high because Chris Larsen in that moment had passed the net worth of Mark Zuckerberg. And the truth is that today, all it would take is an increase in the price of XRP that would put him right back at that same spot and potentially much, much further ahead. I just wanted to share that for a little bit of perspective about what it is that has already happened and what may happen in the future. The point here is that Ripple and the founders and the shareholders of that company have no reason to want to see the price of XRP do anything other than rise. The monthly release of XRP from the escrow allows the company to continue to fund its operations and provide more use cases for the XRP ledger. Let's move on and let's talk a little bit about how to actually value these different networks. Earlier, we talked about how we have the network itself and then we have the token. And we can look at the token as like a key card that you can use to actually utilize that network. But when it comes to valuation, we often only look at the token and the price of the token. But maybe there's another way to look at that. Bitcoin is often thought of as digital gold and a store of value. And so it gets more value as more people use and trust the network. One way to think about this is through Metcalfe's law. The value of a network is proportional to the square of the number of its users. Metcalfe's law says that the value of a network grows faster than the number of people in it, because every new person can connect with all of the others that have already been there, multiplying the possible connections and making the whole network more valuable. This applies for both Bitcoin and for the XRP ledger network. Simply put, the more that people use Bitcoin, the token, the more valuable the entire network can become. Another thing to note is that Bitcoin is designed to only have 21 million ever in existence. And the way that Bitcoin actually comes into circulation is through a disinflationary mechanism, where the miners that we talked about earlier actually earn half as much Bitcoin for mining it every 4 years or so. So the growth of the supply will steadily decrease over time. Now, when it comes to XRP, you might be able to value it and look at it in a very different kind of way. XRP is designed as a bridge asset for liquidity in cross-border payments. The more liquidity that XRP has, meaning how easily it can be bought and sold and moved for other assets, then the more value it has for banks and payment providers around the world. High liquidity lowers friction and costs in the transactions using XRP, and therefore could boost demand for XRP as a utility token over the XRP ledger network. When it comes to the supply, XRP has a deflationary mechanism baked in. So although all of XRP was pre-mined at the beginning, it has a deflationary mechanism in that it is burned with every transaction that is done over the XRP ledger network. You pay for transactions over the network in XRP, and that XRP that's used as a transaction fee is burned. Unlike Bitcoin's predictable disinflationary schedule, XRP's supply decreases based upon network usage, and that ties scarcity directly to activity over the network. Bitcoin's token is supposed to gain its value from network adoption and digital scarcity. It's a digital store of value and a fiat money system alternative. XRP's token is supposed to get its value from liquidity and its transactional utility. It's designed to be a fast, efficient bridge currency, freeing up trillions of dollars in capital and reducing friction from within the current banking system. Besides the technical and economic differences, there's also this massive philosophical divide. Bitcoin says opt out and tear down the old system and pave a new way forward. The XRP ledger and the XRP token are more about making the system that we have today faster, cheaper, and also more transparent. One is more of a rebellion and the other is much more like a reform. And there's a lot of people that are like taking sides about which one is right or which one is better than the other, when quite frankly, they solve two completely different problems. To wrap things up, this is about technology and what that may mean in its economic implications. You can believe that Bitcoin is by far the best money that ever existed and still understand that XRP has its use cases. And just because XRP is faster and more scalable than Bitcoin doesn't mean that Bitcoin has no value whatsoever. Instead of looking at this as some competition between two assets and networks that can take over the monetary system of the future, I think it might make a little bit more sense to separate these two networks and look at their merits and values independently. I'm Keith D, here to talk about everything money and markets. And if you haven't been here, like and subscribe. If you've been around, check out the link in the description for more.